Okay. Today we'll begin Ayin Gimel, 83b, right at the top of the new Mishnah. We thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. And this chus for learning. Shall we say some English immediately? Mishnah starts like this. Begeres. It's a girl that's over 12 and a half. So she's not going to be able to, her vows are not going to be nullified by her father's participation together with the Aros, because she's out of her father's jurisdiction. Or if she waited 12 months, she's not a begeres, but she waited 12 months from the engagement, from the betrothal, and it's already time for the wedding. Or Va'almana, Lamed Yom, or she was a widow already, and now she's waiting only 30 days, because 12 months for a regular girl or 30 days for a widow would be the amount of time between the betrothal and the marriage. So at this time, it already becomes the obligation on the husband to support his fiancée, his betrothed. So in this case, Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer Agadol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes, the student of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai. He says, since the husband has to support his wife because the time has come for the marriage, and it becomes his financial obligation now to support her. If that's the case, then Yafer. Then you should also have that ability also to annul the vows. We're talking about now without the father's participation. That's what it would mean. That it becomes as if they're fully married, which would in a real regular marriage, then the husband annuls the vows without the father. The Chachamim say that the husband cannot annul the vows without the father's participation until he's actually.
There's someone's noise in the background. Can you mute everyone?
Yeah. Let me do that. Okay. Sorry. We're on 83. 83. We're just finishing the Mishnah on 83b. I'm sorry, 73. 73. Jump the week. So and the Chachamim say that the husband can only annul the vow once the marriage is consummated. Alone. He can only annul the vows alone once the marriage is consummated. Okay. Commentators here say that the Chachamim would be the view of Rabbi Yeshua. We're going to see that it's going to get complicated to say that, but nevertheless, they say that the Chachamim is Rabbi Yeshua that always argues with Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua and the Mishnayos are always arguing. There's another student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, Ashri Yeladate. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes is the Bar Sid Sheinam Betipa. He never forgets anything.
We're both teachers of Rabbi Akiva.
Both teachers of Rabbi Akiva. We'll see that in the next Mishnah. Okay. Amar Rabba. Rabba comes along. Rabba is Rabba Bar Nachmani, is the Amira. Comes along and he says, Rabbi Eliezer, Mishnah Rishayna, Amru Davar Echad. Rabbi Eliezer and the Mishnah Rishayna, the first version of a Mishnah, say the same thing. Now, usually when you have the Amr Davar Echad, usually you have that from Abaya or something. But could be from Rab also.
What is that?
What happens is there's a lot of times what the Gemara does is it takes an opinion about something and another opinion about something else, another opinion about something, and says, you know what, all of those opinions are really all the same opinion. Now, when you look at them carefully, they're not always they don't actually agree with each other. Our Gemara is going to suggest that what he means is that they actually agree with each other. But a lot of times it means they have the same underlying opinion and principle. So we're gonna learn the Mishnah Rishayna to see what this is. It says the Tanan was taught in the Mishnah. Naisnan lebesula yud beis chaydish leparnas atzma. A virgin girl is going to get 12 months from the betrothal until the wedding, so that she can prepare herself. Yud beis chaydish. What happens if the 12 months arrive and the husband doesn't do the wedding? He doesn't bring her into the house. And she says, what's going on? So, she already starts to eat from his property because the time for the wedding has arrived. So it becomes his obligation to support her. But and she can also eat truma. We're talking about that the husband is a Kohen. So she's marrying a Kohen, and her family is not Kohanim. So, but because the time of the wedding has arrived, he's already obligated to support her. What's the rule if a Kohen marries a woman that's not a Kohen? So at the marriage, of course, he's allowed to. She becomes part of his family. She eats truma. But really, midaraisa, even at the betrothal, she eats truma. Now we have a reason why we shouldn't allow that. We have actually two reasons. The Gemara says one reason is that maybe at the wedding itself, he's going to find out that she has a blemish that he wasn't able to see before the wedding. At the wedding, he was able to see she has a blemish.
If the chuppah was put off, what's her status now as far as
She was well. What we're learning now from the Mishnah Rishayna was we're going to say what Rabbah wants to do is that since she's able to eat truma as if she's married, so that would also tell me that now the husband can also annul the vows, just like Rabbi Eliezer said that from the time of the wedding, when that arrives, then both truma and annulling of vows should take effect. One of them we get from our Mishnah, and one of them we get from the Mishnah Rishayna, which is what we're quoting here. Okay. Yeah, from Ksubas. The other reason why she wouldn't be able to eat truma after the betrothal is because she's not living in the husband's house. She was living in her father's house. She may end up, very good, taking the cup of wine and sharing it with her brother. You got to taste this wine. My fiance gave me this wine. It's a nice wine. And she passes it over to her brother. Again, she's not living in the husband's house. She's living in her father's house. Pass it over to the brothers of Yisrael. The truma is going to end up in the hands of Yisrael. So we say that until the actual wedding, she should not be eating truma. But once the time of the wedding arrives and she's supported by the husband, then she is allowed to eat truma. Okay, then we go on. We say avala yavam. This is going to get a little complicated on the next page, but right here it's simple. One of the explanations for eating truma, the explanation for eating truma is that really anything that's acquired by the Kohen is now allowed to eat truma. It's not only his wife; it's even a slave that he buys is allowed to eat truma. The non-Jewish slave is allowed to eat truma because kinyan kaspai. Now the yavam, what would happen over here is like this. She was married to a Kohen. The Kohen dies, no children. She goes back to her father's house. She doesn't eat truma anymore. If she would have had a child, she would be eating truma because of the child. But she doesn't have a child. So now she cannot eat truma. She goes back to her father's Yisrael. The only thing is, she's supposed to marry her husband's brother. She's a Shemeres Yavam. He's a Kohen. So maybe that's considered a betrothal because there's that attachment there, Zika. There's an attachment there that she should be marrying him. And the reason is because the Yavam didn't acquire her kinyan kaspai. That was min hashamayim. There was no betrothal there that took place that was considered an acquisition. not considered.
So the Zika wouldn't have.
The Zika does not have that effect,
He can still opt out.
and he can still opt out, right? Right. So she doesn't need truma. Okay. Also, she's chodashim b'fnei abal, she's chodashim b'fnei hayavam. V'afil kulam b'fnei abal chasiyem mechad. V'kulam b'fnei hayavam chasiyem mechad. Ein echeles b'truma. The Mishnah Rishayna. Now, it doesn't matter the arrangement, not the arrangement, the scenario. Whether she waited already a year or almost a year for the husband, and then he died, and now she's a day by the yavam, or she waited 6 months and 6 months, or she waited 1 day and then he died, and then she waited the rest of the year by the yavam. Doesn't matter. The yavam doesn't help her eat truma. Okay, that's the first Mishnah. It's a discussion in the Ran. If this last point is also including if she waited a complete year by the husband and then the husband died. Didn't say that clearly. It just said if you waited a little bit less than a year by the husband and then the husband died. We switched topics from annulling vows to eating truma. We compared them as if it's the same thing. That's what Rabbi's doing. And saying, oh, Rabbi Eliezer says annul vows, that fits exactly with the Mishnah Rishayna that says eat truma. Then the Mishnah goes on, it says, Bezin shalach re'em amro, but the Bezin after that said, we still have those concerns. We have the concerns that maybe she'll pass it over to her brother, a cup of wine to her brother. We'll have the concern that maybe he'll find out that she has a mum, even though the 12 months have passed. And the truma, what's going to happen if he finds out she has a mum? Going to say, well, the engagement's off, the betrodal's off. I didn't know that the whole thing is a mekach taz. It was a mistaken acquisition. And said what would come out is that she was eating truma, and she was never allowed to, because she was never really, there was a mistake, the marriage. And we're concerned that because he didn't actually see her fully, right? Because they were never married, they were just betrothed. So there's a possibility he's going to find a blemish that he's not going to like.
I mean, is that also?
Yeah, this is in Ksubas. Well,
It seems like I just bringing it up now, but a lot of times there were like these moments we talk about like a broken piece of wood. You know,
right,
it seems like it was very common.
right,
You know.
right.
And I don't know. Maybe some people can mistake that for a moment.
Right.
I guess it is. It's considered.
Right. Was that considered a mum? She says mukasates. Was that considered a mekach taz? That was a discussion.
Yeah.
Here, not necessarily we're talking about a mum that she was a mukasates. A mum could be anything, thing under her clothing that bothers her. Well,
This is an argument for taking your fiancé to the beach in a bikini, so you can figure the stuff out before the marriage.
yeah. So the understanding here is that
Well, this stuff doesn't apply. So,
the understanding here is that the relatives would have seen her bathing. Somebody, his relatives, would see her bathing at some point throughout those 12 months. But they call that bedikas chutz, because they don't actually do a full examination of that. When he marries her, that's called, I guess, bedikas pnim. It's a funny reference, because the bedikas chutz, bedikas pnim, used by the sheikhet, that he checks the animal. He checks it from the outside or from the inside, but that's the expression here. Okay, the Beis Din Shalach Re'em says that it's not good enough that bedikas chutz from the relatives. It's not good enough that he's already feeding her because the 12 months have passed. But the fact that she's not living in his house, the cup could still get passed to the brothers. Okay. Initial actually comes to the wine. The truma would be the wine. It's also bread. It's grain, wine, and oil. That's the original truma. Now, there's a little bit of an issue here. A slight issue. We wanted to say that Rabbi Eliezer is following the opinion of the Mishnah Rishayna. Mishnah Rishayna says that she's allowed to eat truma after the 12 months. Rabbi Lezer says that after the 12 months, he can annul the vows. See, it's exactly the same thing. Only problem is that the Mishnah Achrayna, Justin Shal Achrayim, the second, the later ruling is that she can't. Now, does Rabbi Lezer fit with the later ruling? Now, everyone holds that really she's allowed to eat truma. It's just a rabbinic decree. So why is it only following the Mishnah Rishayna? It really doesn't have to do with the Mishnah Rishayna or the Mishnah Achrayna. There's a rabbinic decree. The question is the cup going to get passed? That doesn't really tell me about is she under his jurisdiction. I mean, right now he has to feed her. So really it could fit with both. So the Ran says over here, that the rabbinic decree, if he wasn't able to annul the vows, then the rabbis wouldn't have allowed the truma as well. What we're thinking at this point is that we're equating a rabbinic decree together with the biblical laws. Where we've even though we could have easily said that it doesn't matter, but that's what we're thinking at this point. Okay, Amalei Abaya. The Ran discusses this. The comparison and how it doesn't really match up perfectly, and then he just adjusts it by saying that we're equating the rabbinic decree with the biblical law of annulling vows. Well, Amalei Abaya. Abaya says to Rabbah. Abaya is like the student, maybe a stepson even, of Rabbah. Dilmalahi, how do you know that this comparison is really accurate? Adkan like Ashmina and Mishnah Rishayna Lamechel B'Truma Derabanan. That Mishnah was talking about eating truma. Abel Nedarim Daf Malay. Maybe the Mishnah Rishayna would not agree with Rabbi Eliezer. Now, there's two ways of translating this. One way of translating it is, maybe the Mishnah Rishayna says that she's allowed to eat truma that's of rabbinic nature, not real truma. The Ran doesn't learn like that.
Does that mean not from Diganakos?
Yeah, it would mean things from a utzitz, from a pot that was grown in a pot, or things that were like vegetables or those types of things that didn't have the biblical law of truma. The Ran doesn't learn like that. The Ran says maybe the Mishnah Rishayna says that she's allowed to eat truma, which the problem of eating truma was only of rabbinic nature anyway. Not that the truma was rabbinic nature. The problem of truma, what was the problem of eating truma? That was that maybe she'll pass the cup over to her brother. But that's only a rabbinic decree. So she's anyways biblically allowed to eat the truma. So the Mishnah Rishayna says, okay, so after 12 months she's allowed to eat truma. But how do you know that they're going to say?
I'm reading the notes here. There's the rabbinic truma is like there's also other foods that's
There's
not
other foods,
including the
right? Yeah, other foods that's not the grain, right? Or it could be that it was grew in a pot that wasn't in the ground.
Or a container that's a
container. Right? So, Abel Nedarim Daf Malay. But how do you know the Mishnah Rishayna would agree with Rabbi Lezer that he can annul the vows? Maybe let's do it the opposite. Let's say that Rabbi Lezer only says that you're allowed to annul the vows, but maybe he would say that she can't eat truma, and he would be stricter than the Mishnah Rishayna. Now this is a little odd. Why would we say that? If he's allowed to annul her vows, that's a biblical law. In the Truma, you should have been able to do anyway. It was just a rabbinic decree. Why would it work like that? The Gemara explains. Following what Rav Pinchas says. Anyone that takes a vow, any woman that takes a vow, it has in mind that if my husband doesn't agree to it, then I give it up. As if there's a stipulation there. About Truma. But when it comes to Truma, maybe she should not be allowed to eat Truma, even according to Rabbi Eliezer, that's so lenient about the vows. That's because when a woman takes a vow, she, without saying it, it's as if she said a stipulation that it's only if her husband agrees.
It says here, so Rabbi Eliezer considers a betrothed woman as someone who's already married. Is that?
One second.
First vows.
Yeah, Rabbi Eliezer considers someone, a betrothed woman, as if she's married after the 12 months of waiting for the marriage, only with regard to vows, but not with regard to Truma. In other words, what Rabbah said, that's Rabbi Eliezer and the Mishnah Rishayna are saying the same thing, we said exactly not like that. The Mishnah Rishayna wouldn't agree with Rabbi Eliezer because that's a biblical law. Rabbi Eliezer wouldn't agree with the Mishnah Rishayna because he says that the vows is much more lenient because there's a stipulation there that the woman, without saying it, is expecting, if her husband doesn't agree, then the vow is not valid.
So Rabbi Eliezer is saying that she doesn't even eat truma.
No, regarding truma, he's not arguing. She eats truma. Either according to the Mishnah Rishayna or the Mishnah Achrayna, whichever one. He's not. That would what we'd say. He's not mixing into that. Okay. Now. Ran mentions an interesting thing. Says this concept of Rav Pinchas, Shmei Derava, that when a woman takes a vow, she has in mind that that it's only if her husband agrees, consents to this. So let's say there was a rabbinic marriage. Father died, and the brothers and the mother, let's say, marry off this girl to someone. Now she can walk out of that marriage, and she's a young girl. The father would marry her off, then that would be a biblical marriage. But this is only a rabbinic marriage. She can walk out of it when the brothers marry her off. Now, can the husband annul the vows? Now, if she's 11 years old, even though she's not 12, she's not bas mitzvah.
Regardless if her brothers marry her off or her father, she's a katana. She can just walk out.
No, that's only if the brothers. If she would need a get if the father married. It's only if the brothers married her off. Now, can the husband annul the vows? Because her vows are valid once she's 11 years old. Mufla samach lesh. The vows are valid from 1 year before bar bas mitzvah. So for a boy it would be 12, for a girl it would be 11. If that's the case, can the husband, that's only a rabbinic husband, annul biblical vows? So based on Rav Pinchas, yes, he can. Because when she took the vow, she had that in mind that it's only if my husband would agree. She doesn't know rabbinic husband, not rabbinic husband. She's whatever the husband. Okay. So that's what would come out. Now, Ron mentions, we're saying this about a woman taking a vow with her husband's consent. What about if a fellow takes a vow and he has in mind or something that if his friend agrees, he has a partner, says, I'm never going to do business in that country again. And the partner is very involved in this. So it would affect the partner. Did he have in mind, just like the wife, that it's only if the partner consents? Should we say the same thing? Ron says it's impossible to say the same thing because still, even when the woman takes the vow, the husband still has to say mufralach. He has to actually annul the vow in a certain way. It's not just automatic. There's a way that it gets annulled. If it would have been an actual stipulation and she would have said, if my husband agrees or something, or if the person would have said, if I'm taking this vow on condition that my partner agrees, so then it would be whatever the stipulation is. But if it's not a stated stipulation and you just want to make that assumption, so then it's not going to work, because there are technicalities on how the vow gets annulled, and the friend can't say about his friend mufralach mufralach. You have to go to the Rav and say mutarlach mutarlach. It's a different expression.
Wow.
So it's obvious from that you can't just get out of a vow by saying, oh, it was an implied stipulation. Okay. Shemeres Yavam, next Mishnah. Bein liyavam echad, bein l'shnei yavam. We're talking about a woman that her husband died. When we mentioned this before, we were talking about he was a Kohen and she's eating truma. Drop that. Ignore all of that now. We're not talking about that. He's not a Kohen. We're not talking about truma. We're talking about a betrothed woman that her husband dies. And now she's supposed to marry the Yavam. It could be she was actually married, and the husband died, and now she's supposed to marry the Yavam. It's right here, it's unclear what we're dealing with. But either way, she's sort of betrothed to the Yavam. Sort of. There's Zika. There's an attachment there, but it's not a marriage. So it says like this: whether there's only one brother of the deceased husband, or whether there's more than one brother to the deceased husband. Rabbi Eliezer says that the Yavam can annul the vows of the Shemeres Yavam. Shemeres is waiting to do Yavam. Now that would only be together with the father. It's impossible. It must be a young girl, because otherwise it would need a real marriage to annul the vows alone. It has to be with the partnership of the father that he can annul the vows.
And this is the person who's in waiting to do chalitza
Or yibam, yeah. Rabbi Shua says le'echad avalei l'shnayim. Shua says only if there's one brother that's going to do the yibam. If there's any more than one brother there, then we don't know who's going to do the yibam. And then you don't know which brothers.
one of the brothers.
Right. The mitzvah is with the oldest.
Right.
But that's just the mitzvah. All of them are eligible. So you don't know who's the husband. You don't know as if you don't know who's the betrothed one. So who can do the hafara, the annulment of the vows? Rabbi Kiva says there's no such thing. None of them can do hafara, can annul the vows. Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Eliezer has a kal v'chaymer. If the person goes ahead and finds a wife, his own actions allow him to annul those vows together with the partnership of the father, right? So if heaven gives him a wife, don't you think that's stronger than that he found a wife on his own? This wife was given to him by heaven because because his brother passed away, and heaven decided that he has to marry her. If he's the only brother. So this is Rabbi Eliezer's logic. The only thing is Rabbi Eliezer holds that even if there's more than one brother, the same thing would apply. Amalei Rabbi Akiva says, 1 second, Lloyd, that's not so. Im amrit bisha shekanu hulatzmim sein lachem barashus tem yishik lemen hashmaim sheish lachem barashus. When a man betroths a woman, so no one else can marry her from that point on. But over here, even though this was given by heaven, shidduch min hashamayim, it's not exactly the ideal situation, the preferred way, right? It's not the preferred way, but one of the brothers can mix in and take over the marriage. So there's a huge difference. By a regular betrothal, we understand why he can annul the vows. But over here, he's going to annul the vows. He doesn't have full rights there. Someone else can come step. One of the other brothers can step in. Amalei Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua responds, Akiva, Divarecha b'shnei yevamim. Your words are only a good question if there's two brothers there. Ma'ata meishav al yavam echad. What are you going to say if there's only one brother? Then that yivam really worked. It wasn't yivam. That shemeres yavam, that zika, that attachment should work. Which, by the way, is Rabbi Yeshua's view. That when there's only one brother there, that one brother can do hafara, can annul the vows. Amar loi eina yavama gemura liyavam kshem sharusa gemura liisha. The yavama is not finalized, confirmed, the way an arusa is confirmed to the husband. Okay, so we got Rabbi Akiva's opinion, even though the logic that he started with doesn't actually fit with his opinion at the end. Okay, Bishleim Rabbi Akiva. We understand Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says Savarein Zika. Rabbi Akiva's opinion is that Zika is nothing. Remember how Zika came in? Zika came in like this. That let's say there's two brothers, Reuven and Shimon. We're back in Yavamis now, and Reuven passes away. Now Shimon is supposed to marry the wife. Let's call her, I don't know, Reuvena. So Shimon is supposed to marry Reuven's wife, Reuvena. So let's say he doesn't marry her. Would he be allowed to marry her mother? So was that attachment that he disqualify him as if it? So if you hold ein zika, so then he was never attached to her.
Could marry her.
So he could marry her relatives.
Is that one of the prohibited connections there?
Well, zika means that they're considered attached. Ein zika means they're not attached.
So there wouldn't be a zika for.
According to Rabbi
the
Akiva,
spouse's mother.
Jim says the zig is nothing.
Well, no, if a person is married to his wife, he can't marry her mother or her daughter.
Yeah.
Here, he was never married to this woman. Shimon was never married to Reuvena. Reuven was
His
married to
brother
Reuvena,
was.
and he's supposed to do yibam, but he doesn't want to do yibam. He's going to do chalitza. So, what about her relatives? Now, this I think when it's one brother, I think it's clear that he can't marry. But when there's more than one brother, are all the brothers forbidden to Reuvena's mother
Yeah,
and
that's what
daughter?
I wonder.
That's
I can't remember.
so that has to do with if there's what's our view of Zika.
You know, I read once that
That was
the question came to the Kasam Sofer about Yvonne, and the woman said, I'm not interested. I'm never going to marry again. I also don't want to do chalitza, it's humiliating. And so the question came to him, what should be done? And he said, Zika is enough of a connection that you can't just leave it as is.
Oh.
If you're not going to marry, you must take action.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't understand his reasoning until today, reading all the things all the rights and obligations that come along with
Right.
the status of a Zika.
Right. There could be more things going on. It's not just we'll leave it alone and just drop
He
it.
said there's too much relationship. Just let it go.
So Rabbi Akiva's view is that there's no Zika. That means according to Rabbi Akiva, the Yavam cannot annul cannot annul the vows.
Does that mean there's no zika or that it's not strong enough?
It's not strong enough. Rabbi Yeshua Savayesh Zika. Rabbi Yeshua says there is Zika, and that's why he can annul the vows. Other Rabbi Lezer, my timer. What's the reason for Rabbi Lezer? Yesh Zika, but Ein Breira. How do you know which one it is? There's different ways of learning Ein Breira here. I think the easiest way is to ignore the big concept of Breira and just say, but it wasn't decided. Breira is this complicated concept of retroactively seeing what happened later. You don't have to add that in. You could read it just without that. But Ein Breira, but we don't know who it was. Amar Rabami. Rabami says, to explain Rabbi Lezer's view, what we're going to say is that he did a rabbinic betrothal on his sister-in-law, on Ruvena. Shimon did Maimer. Maimer is this kedushin, a betrothal that's done for a yavama, which means that once the Maimer is done, then the attachment between Shimon and Ruvena is now strengthened versus Levi and Yehuda and Yisachar and Zvulun. That also could have done that, but now it's determined that it's Shimon that's going to do the Yibam in the future. Rabbi Lezer Savar Laka Beishamai Damar Maimer Kaina Kinyan Gomer. Rabbi Lezer is following the view of Beishamai that says that Maimer is a full Kinyan. That means it's now as if they're married.
But she could walk out.
Which means that the way that this marriage ends now is not through chalitza, but through a get. That's what Beis Shammai holds. That Maimer is strong enough to consider it a marriage that a regular divorce now would end this. Me and this, they walk out. Maimer was a kedushin on the Yavama.
Oh.
Usually there's kedushin and then there's the Nisuin.
Yeah.
This is a kedushin on the Yavam. Rabbi Yeshua says, Hanimili b'chad Yavam. We would only say that Maimer would work if there was only one Yavam there. Aval b'shnei Yavam imlai. Rabbi Yeshua is concerned like this. Maimer doesn't really make it a full marriage. What would happen is that, let's say Shimon does Maimer on Ruvena, then Levi comes along and has relations with her.
Wow.
So then it turns out now that Levi is now the real Yavam to Ruvena. He displaced Shimon. So how could it be that Shimon could annul the vows?
Adultery.
It's not 100% adultery because that was only a marriage, rabbinic marriage. She can't eat truma. She cannot eat truma, as we learned on the last page.
Once he does Maimer, isn't she? Now
As
an
if
Arusa?
rabbinically.
So
Maybe some sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
But the relations is much stronger than the Maimer. So it would be that. So it can't be that because of a Maimer she should be allowed to annul the vows if that Maimer is not 100%. It's not like by a regular arus, a regular person that betroths the woman, is betrothed to a woman. If another guy comes along and has relations with her, that's a regular case of adultery, and they're still married. They're still married. It doesn't affect the kedushin that was done before.
She's pregnant already.
Whatever the case is, they're still, that relationship is still there.
Wow.
But over here, the relationship goes off.
Totally.
Yeah, because it makes the Maimer into nothing. Rabbi Kiva Savar ein Zika. Rabbi Kiva says that there's no such thing as Zika. Okay, so we figured this out, that even with the Maimer, it's not going to do anything.
Yeah, so he's saying, as a matter of principle, there's no concept of Zika.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Even with the Maimer.
Wow. Are these guys all contemporaneous to him? They're his
Yeah.
students, no?
Yeah.
All of them? Ami also?
No, Rabbi Ami is much later. So the three opinions here are all contemporaries.
Students,
Yeah, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shon, Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Ami is just explaining the view of Rabbi Eliezer, which helps us understand what he meant, because we're talking about that. How could it be that one of the Yavams can annul the vows? What about the other one? So he said, well, he did Maimer. That's Rabbi Ami introduced. Now the next could throw you off over here. It says Ula Rabbi Loz. It says in the Gemara Ula Rabbi Eliezer. But if you read it like that, it's going to confuse things. What you have to do now is you have to say Ula Rabbi Lazar. Take out the Yud. You have a Lazar?
Yeah, both.
Oh, yeah. So the reason why is if it's Rabbi Lazar, then it's Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas, who's an Amira. We're now saying Rabbi Lazar ben Pedas's view about Beis Shammai. According to Rabbi Lazar, that says even Beis Shammai doesn't hold that Maimer is a full Kinyan. Rabbi Shammai only holds that the only thing Mimer does is it allows that if Mimer was done, you see, we were making it like there's a few brothers, and Mimer designates which brother. But Mimer can also designate which of the wives the Yibam is going to be done on. So
Yes, several wives.
several wives. So
Which that made Yavams.
So you only have to do one Yavam with one wife. So what would happen here if you do Mimer, that would allow the other brothers to now marry the relatives of the other wives. Because this is not the relatives of his Zika,
Trying to
of the one.
the vocab. If you're doing Yibum, therefore you're doing Mimer.
Mimer would be a initial stage of Yibam.
Okay, yeah, so
So it designates which wife the Yibam is going to be performed on. And then the Yibam itself would just be that they live together.
okay, so it's a prereq.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a pre-qualification.
So, according to Rabbi Lazar, that explains Beis Shammai that the Mimer doesn't actually work to make it his wife. So, what are we going to talk about? How are we going to explain why the Shemeres, why the Yavam can do Hafara, can annul the vows of the Yavama? We're talking about that he did Mimer. Mimer doesn't fully work, but the time came for the Yavam to marry the Yavama, and he didn't do that.
Right.
So they went to court.
Who?
The Yavama
She wants to get
she wants to be supported, and Besdin said that the time arrived for them to get married. So now he's obligated to support her. If he's obligated to support her, so then what kicks in is Rabbi Pinchas that we learned before. Pinchas says that whenever a woman takes a vow, she always has an implied condition there. That is, if my husband agrees, so then that's why the husband can annul the vow, because he's already supporting her. So even if we say that the Mimer itself doesn't work, but the support that the Besdin already said he has to support her, so then now it's going to work that he can annul her vows, according to Rabbi Eliezer, according to Rabbi Lazar, which follows Beis Shammai. Now this fits because Rabbi Eliezer himself is Shamuti. Rabbi Eliezer is a follower of Beis Shammai. Shamuti, that's what the Gemara said. Okay, let's leave it here. Have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Wow.
I liked how we did some.
Good Shabbos,
Have a good